This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think it's tough. Well, try that in a small town, see how far you make it down the road.
Yeah, that is Jason Aldean. If you're not a country music fan, that name probably will not mean a whole lot to you, but he suddenly shot to fame. Well, he was famous before that, but his song shot to fame because of a music video he produced. And as I was watching this unfold, the latter part of last week and over the weekend, I thought, all the negative attention that he's getting, it's only going to be great for him, right? He wrote a song, Try That in a Small Town. The song actually was released back in May, but the video didn't come out until last week. And it was the video that literally catapulted him to dinner table conversation all around the country. The video includes clips of riots, right? It's actual news footage taken mostly in 2020 following George Floyd's death. And the riots were led by Black Lives Matter, as you know, and Antifa. And his point was that people in small towns, if you listen to the lyrics there, he says, they're not going to allow that to happen. Try that in a small town, spit in a cop's face, right? It's not going to happen. Well, one of the video clips included an image of a county courthouse in Columbia, Tennessee, where a black man was lynched 100 years ago. And it was also the site of the Columbia race riots that took place there. And suddenly this all became about race and how could he do that? The left's not telling you that, hey, a lot of movies have been shot in front of there. And, I often think, when you hear stories like this, if I was to shoot a video or do a stand-up or do something somewhere, do I do my research and say, I wonder what happened here a century ago? I got to make sure it's politically correct. No. And this was not what the video was about. So a Tennessee state senator saw that, and he released a statement. He said, as Tennessee lawmakers, we have an obligation to condemn Jason Aldean's heinous song calling for racist violence, right? I mean, it's really, come on. This is a total mischaracterization, misrepresentation. But Aldean pointed out on Twitter that there was no reference to race at all in the song. He says that there's not a single lyric in the song that references race or points to it. There isn't a single video clip that is not real news footage that has not been seen, right? And while I can try to respect others to have their own interpretation of a song of music, this one's gone too far. So a lot more outcry from the left about it, so much that CMT, they actually yanked this video. Shannon Watts, who's the founder of Moms Demand Action, she says, look, it's a grassroots movement demanding reasonable solutions to address the country's culture of gun violence. Basically, she claims that, she's getting death threats now, and she's calling for people to boycott CMT, again, country, music, television, which I found ironic they'd pull his video, right? And one analyst thinks that this is a kind of a Bud Light movement. Let's talk about it. James Herson is here. I'd love to hear from you, too. If you want to sound off, the number's 888-914-9149. 888-914-9149. James, of course, he teaches law at Trinity Law School and Biola University of Southern California, and he writes the Left Coast Report for Newsmax.com. Check him out there, and he's been a regular contributor here over the years, giving us news analysis and insight on a litany of issues. And Jim, it's good to have you back. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. Great to be with you. I think this is a Bud Light moment. I think you said that. This song is number one right now in the country. And of all music, it's number one download. It's on track to be the largest selling song of the year.
Oh, my gosh.
And so Sound of Freedom is number one. This song is number one. The American public sees through these attacks. This is defamation. It's slander. Yep. As you pointed out, as many people have pointed out, that's not what this video is about. They're not just attacking the song, the video, they're attacking the man, Jason Aldean, trying to call him a bigot. Yep. And I have a theory. This is my theory because I've watched Jason over the years. Last year, his wife launched a clothing line that made fun of wokeism, and she was attacked for being a bigot. And he, of course, defended his wife.
Yep.
I think they had the long knives. I think they were lying in wait, looking for some excuse to attack this guy, because their attacks make no sense. It has nothing to do with the song, nothing to do with the man. What he said in his own statement is what his song is about is an unspoken rule that people have in small towns that he experienced. And he said, we all have each other's backs and we look out for each other. Now that's a sentiment, that's a Christian sentiment.
Yeah.
We all look out for each other. We love each other is what he's saying. And he's also saying, yes, this actual footage, as appalling as it is, as Americans watched atrocities, criminal atrocities take place as people were dragged out of their vehicles and beaten. Police officers were injured, some were killed. And we heard our leaders telling us, and people in media telling us, that these were mostly peaceful protests. Yep. So it is gratifying when an artist like Jason, he didn't write this song, but that he would pick it and sing it and do a video like this. And of course, that courthouse scene, that's a very common place because it's very colorful and beautiful there in Columbia, the Columbia courthouse. Tons of films and shootings and videos have been done there. There is no way, as a matter of fact, the average resident, citizen who lives in Tennessee didn't know that history. And if you're going to say that you can't put out a video with that history, then you ought to not shoot any videos in Tennessee, because Tennessee was a slave state. So I mean, that reasoning is absurd.
No, I could not agree with you more, Jim. The lyrics, I want to get back to something you said about race here, too. This has nothing to do with race. I think of the rap music that is out today, right? I think about the racism that's in some of these lyrics. If the left cared about songs lionizing the deaths of black people, they'd be protesting music labels and radio stations that profit from rap music and drill music genres that brag about, real life murders of black youths. Variety magazine, they ran a piece and they said their true gripe with the song is how it conflates the act of protesting with violent crime. They actually were acknowledging and condemning the destructive left policies of activists, they consider wrongthink. And that's what's happening right now. I mean, we are seeing this. I think the left, this is not about racism. I think they don't like rural America. I don't think they like what all this stands for. Aldean says in his lyrics, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think you're tough? Well, try that in a small town. See how far you're going to make it down the road. Now, I'm not a fan of vigilante justice, but he says, around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long. You'll find out. I recommend you don't try that in a small town. I was reading a piece somewhere where the commentator was saying, and I like your take on this, we're in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Remember when the riots took place there after the George Floyd riots? That the men of that town actually went and were defending their front doors. They were standing on rooftops. They had baseball bats. They had all of these other things saying, you're not going to do that here. And the left did not like that. They want these guys to do what they tell them, to fall in line, right? But I think Jason Aldean's talking about what middle America, what America's like, rural America is like, where there's a different set of values, and we're going to defend and take care of our own.
Yeah, we protect our families, we protect our loved ones, and we do that, and we look out for each other. We have each other's backs. You brought that up, and that was the Kyle Rittenhouse case where he was out there patrolling in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I live and have to often go work in Los Angeles, where years before Kenosha, years before the pandemic, there were the famous or infamous Rodney King riots. And people in an area where Koreans lived, it was called Koreatown, the individuals that owned businesses got up on the rooftops and they made themselves visible holding firearms, and they were able to stop the rioting from destroying their businesses it prevented violence. It didn't cause violence. And I'm sure that's what Aldean is singing about, but it's absolutely not racist. But right now, the internet is full of African-American people expressing their love for Jason Aldean. In many cases, it's young men lip-syncing this particular song. Try that in a small town, because they have that sentiment too. It's actually part of the model of St. Joseph. It's part of being a Christian man and understanding the duties and obligation that God places on you to help and defend and protect your family and your community. So, I mean, that sentiment is a beautiful sentiment, and most people around the world embrace it.
Mark is listening to us in Philadelphia. Hi, Mark.
Really disappointed that I'm even hearing this discussion, because it definitely supports, it's a veiled threat of come to our town and we'll take care of you. To sit there and even say that St. Joseph would condone this, what your speaker there is saying, is just amazing to me. I'm mind blown by it, because it definitely is a violent thing, and Jesus never taught that. He never, ever taught that.
Well, Mark, thanks. I'm glad you listened. I'm glad you called. I'm glad you expressed a contrary view.
It bothered me enough. I actually pulled over to make sure I called.
Good for you. I'm glad you did that. I am delighted you had here. Well, let's talk about it for a moment. And James, I want to pick up on this. The lyrics sound, as I said, I'm not a fan of vigilante violence and saying, hey, you spit in a cop's face, we're going to take care of you. I think it speaks to something bigger than that. And two fronts here. And I'll share my thoughts, James. You can follow up. One, I mean, we do have a legitimate right to defense. A catechism, if you go to, I think it's Catechism 2265, very clearly says that as a citizen, you, as an individual, somebody was coming in my home, or I was in a store. I know people were begging those George Floyd protesters and others not to burn their stores, not to injure them. People were being beaten to death. You do have a legitimate right to defense. And it's not only, the Catechism says it's not only a right, but it's a grave duty for the one who's responsible for the lives of others. So the defense of the common good, it says, requires that an unjust aggressor be unable to cause harm. Be unable, again, I will repeat that. The common good requires that an unjust aggressor be rendered unable to cause harm. That's why guys went to the streets and they were holding their baseball bats or on their roofs in Kenosha. If I saw a crowd coming through my neighborhood and I was fearful of my wife, I would do what I had to do to protect my wife and my children. And the Catechism goes on, for those who legitimately hold authority, also they have the right to use arms to repel aggressors against civil communities that have been trusted with responsibility. So that's a tangential point to there. But to Mark's point, I mean, is Aldean saying, hey, look, we're not going to lay down and we're going to take justice in our own hand? Or is he speaking of something bigger, like, hey, your values here don't work? You see, small town America, we're going to resist the extreme, regulations and the laws of big city governments and fight against, the woke mind virus that's infecting schools and businesses. And we don't want your values, your violence in small town America. If you come here, you're going to see what happens. Is that one interpretation? Or to Mark's point, I think he's valid that this is really a call to say, hey, you come here and we're going to take justice in our own hands.
Well, I think it's clear. He says in each chorus, I recommend you don't. In other words, it's deterrence. He is suggesting that because in small towns they love each other and take care of each other, don't try it, because there are people that will prevent it, and take the proper action. And it's true. I mean, in every civilization and every interpretation of Scripture and the teachings of the church, there are situations similar to the ones that we, again, draw the analogy to the Sound of Freedom. If there is a child that is under your care that is going to be harmed, you have a solemn duty to prevent that harm coming to an innocent child. Yep. And similarly, if you have, as we saw, elderly women who are alone being dragged out of their vehicles against their will, that is an act of violence that requires a kind of deterrence to let people know, don't do it here. But to the greater point of whether this song is violent or advocating violence, this song pales in comparison with the constant drumbeat of violence in rap songs that are ignored by virtually everyone, and the kind of violence that come out of Hollywood in these various movies that celebrate violence and have no plot or characters, are all about violence. So it's highly hypocritical, and it's breaking down in partisan lines. It's real sad because the people who are attacking Jason Aldean are all like coming from what we described as the woke mob, and it's tons of bots on Twitter. And so I think we are for peace, but we all know that peace comes through strength.